Boker Tov. Today's Yomi is Bava Basra. I am Bava Basra 72, and we're going to start on the top of 72a. The Daf Yomi is dedicated for Shmir for the Chayalim, Hatzalah for the Shvuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. In this eighth Sarah, we go back before we start on top of 72a. We just have to summarize a couple of points. So the chapter has been discussing whether when one sells a part of his field, does he sell it ba'ayin yafa? He sells generously, meaning that if there's ambiguity, we assume he sold more, or that's the position of Rabbi Akiva. Or the Rabbanan say mochar ba'ayin ra. If there's ambiguity, we assume he sold stingily, and he sold as little as possible. In this context, the Gemara discusses that the Mishnah says that when you sell a field, you have not sold the well and the cistern associated with it, or the carob tree or the sycamore tree, the harv or the shikma. Rabbi Shimon, then the Mishnah says, but if you're makdish your field, to the temple, then you gave everything, including the well and the sycamore. Comes along Rabbi Shimon in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that if you're makdish the field, you are makdish just the field and the carob and the sycamore tree, but not the well and the cistern. Comes along Rav Huna in the Gemara. Rav Huna gives a chiddush. He says, even though the Rabbanan who say mocher ba'ayin ra, that you sell stingily, even though they say that if you acquire two trees in the field of your friend, then you have not acquired the land because your friend sold it with a stingy eye. And also, if you sold two trees, then you kept the land for yourself, because this is consistent with the position of the Rabbanan, mocher ba'ayin ra, that he sold stingily. So the person kept the land for himself, and he didn't acquire the land because the guy who sold them in a stingy manner. The Gemara wants to extend this teaching of Rav Huna also to according to Rabbi Akiva. Even though Rabbi Akiva says you sell with a generous eye, that's by a well and a cistern because it doesn't ruin the ground. But if you sold the trees around your property, you kept the land for itself because otherwise you're ruining your tree. So the Gemara wants to say that Rav Huna says this law even according to Rabbi Akiva. But the Gemara says, well, there we have a question again about that. How could you say Rav Huna says this law even according to Rabbi Akiva? Because we have a contradiction from our Mishnah, because our Rabbi Shimon says in our Mishnah that if you consecrate the field, you have not consecrated the carob tree and the sycamore. And the reason is because the carob tree and the sycamore would have been nourished from the land which was hektish around it, and you can't be nourished from hektish. So this proves that Rabbi Shimon, that you have not sold the land around it. And so therefore, how could Rav Huna say that according to Rabbi Akiva, how could you say that according to Rabbi Akiva, you've sold the land around it? And we see that Rabbi Shimon says you haven't. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Shimon says you haven't given the carob and the sycamore tree. So the Gemara answers this question by saying that Rav Huna was only saying his law according to the Rabbanan, and Rabbi Shimon, who says that when you sell your field to the temple, when you give your field to the temple, you have not given the carob and the sycamore, is because he holds like Rabbi Akiva. He says mochar ba'ayin yafa, you given the land around it. And so therefore Rabbi Shimon is holding like his Rabbi Akiva. So now on the top of 72a, we say, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Akiva. Can you really say that Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva? Can you really establish this position that Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva? But we have a contradiction to this because Vatanya, we learned in the Brisa, and the Brisa says as follows, but basically it's as follows. Hold on one second. Okay, so we go back to the top of 72a. Can we really say that Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva that makdish ba'ayin, that mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher? And that's why he says you haven't been consecrated the carob and the sycamore tree. V'atanya hikdish shloshe ilanos bimata asar beisa. Let's say you consecrated 3 trees from a field, that if they were distant from each other, that if there would be 10 trees in a field of a Basra, then that would be the amount that would be considered like what's called a field that's a base saw. Now, if the field was a stay mikneh, if it was a field that was acquired, then the law is that if you want to redeem such a field, you have to just pay the full value. But if it was a stay achuzah, an inherited field, then after the Jubilee year, you pay 50 shekel to redeem it. It's a special law of a stay achuzah, and then you reduce it by 1 shekel each year. So let's say you have this field, that would be basically the field that's called a base saw. And then and then you consecrated the trees and the land and the trees that are amongst them. So therefore, since you have this amount of trees that were 3 ilanos in this field, and that's considered to be like the size of a base saw, and you consecrated the 3 trees, it's like you consecrated the field with the trees that were amongst them. And so therefore, so when he comes to redeem them from a hekdesh, he doesn't need to redeem the trees by their value, but he's redeeming it as though it was a stei achuzah. So therefore, podeh beis zera chomer se'orim b'chamishim shekel kesef. So therefore, you redeem it as though it was this beis zera chomer se'orim for 50 shekel kesef. Pachos mikan, let's say the field was smaller, or yoser alkan, or let's say the trees were farther apart, meaning to say the 10 trees were taking up a space that was more than base saw, or basically it was less than it, i.e. That the trees were in a space that was smaller than a base saw. Or he consecrated them not simultaneously, but one after the other. Then lo hikdish lo akarka v'aselonos shebeneim. So then, under those circumstances, since he gave the trees independently, he has not consecrated the trees or the land between them. Lefika keshu podeh. So therefore, when he comes to redeem them, podeh silonos pishavein. He redeems the trees by their value. Oh, not only that, afilu hikdish esailonos v'chazer hikdish esakarka. Not only that, even if he consecrated the trees and then he went back and consecrated the land again, kishu podeh, when he comes to redeem the trees, podeh silonos b'shavein v'chazer podeh beiser chomer sirim b'chamishim shekel kesef. And then even if he consecrated them, but he didn't do it simultaneously, first redeems the trees and then he redeems the 50 shekel kesef. Gemara wants to prove from this brisa that Rabbi Shimon does not hold like his Rabbi Akiva, who says mocher b'ayin yafa mocher. So the Gemara says now, who is this brisa like? Because what's the crucial point of the brisa? The brisa doesn't mention Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva, but it has a position that if you don't consecrate the 3 trees together together simultaneously, then we redeem them each for their value and not for the 50 shekel. So that implies that you have not consecrated the space with the trees. So therefore, that proves that you were makdish it with an ayin ra. So how could he say that he's like Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva's position is that you sell with a generous eye. The kol shekain makdish, and for sure you would consecrate with a generous eye. So it can't be that this is like Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbanan, it can't be like the Rabbanan in our Mishnah, because the Rabbanan say that when you consecrate something, even though when you sell something, you sold it with a stingy eye, but when you consecrate everything along with it. So the Rabbanan say that when you're makdish everything with a generous eye. So this position that says when you're makdish, you're still makdish with the stingy eye, it must be El Pshita Rabbi Shimon. It must be like the position of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Ali ben Daman. Rabbi Shimon according to whom? Ali ben Rabbi Akiva. If you want to say Rabbi Shimon's like Rabbi Akiva, it can't be. Amar mocher b'ayin yafa mocher. Rabbi Akiva's position is you sell with a generous eye. V'kol shekain makdish, and for sure when you consecrate something, you consecrate with a generous eye. El Pshita Ali ben Rabbanan. Must be that it's obviously the case that this is Rabbi Shimon according to the Rabbanan. The Kasava Rabbi Shimon, and the Rabbanan would say you're mocher. You're makdish b'ayin yafa, but Rabbi Shimon's position is Rabbi Shimon's position is that the Rabbanan say that just like you sell with a stingy eye, makdish nami b'ayin ra makdish, that you're also being consecrated with a stingy eye stingy eye, umeshayar ara, and that you're leaving the land for yourself. And that's why if you consecrated the trees independently, all you did was consecrate each tree, and you didn't consecrate the land with it. And so therefore, this brisa shows that Rabbi Shimon is holding like the Rabbanon and not like Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, we have a contradiction in Rabbi Shimon's position, because here Rabbi Shimon is saying that you're mocher, that you're makdish with an ayin ra, because so therefore, if you consecrate one field or one tree or two trees independently, you have not consecrated the land with it because you do it with an ayin ra. But whereas Rabbi Shimon says about the carob tree and the sycamore, that the reason why you have not consecrated it is because it's the reason why you have not consecrated it, because the reason why you've consecrated it is because otherwise, if you wouldn't say it's consecrated to the temple, you were being nourished. It was being nourished by the land underneath it, and so therefore he's clear he's old makdish ba'ayin yafa, all the onka mistayakdish. So therefore we have a contradiction between our brisa and the brisa we cited yesterday, that the carob tree and the sycamore are being nourished by stay hektish because he was makdish with a ayin yafa. So how do we explain this contradiction in Rabbi Shimon? So the Gemara says it must be Rabbi Shimon with the Vrem the Rabbanon Kamer. Rabbi Shimon in this brisa must be holding like the Rabbanon. He's saying it according to the Rabbanon's shita. He's saying Lididi, according to me, I hold like Rabbi Akiva. Ki hechi the mocher ba'ayin ra mocher makdish nami ba'ayin ra makdish. He says I hold actually that not like Rabbi Akiva, but he's saying he says, according to me, just like if you sell with a stingy eye, so too when you're consecrating with a stingy eye. V'shiri mishayir. And so therefore you left everything back for yourself. And so therefore, since he didn't consecrate the carob and the sycamore tree, he left it back for himself. So this is basically going back to the brisa we did on Ayin Aleph from Abayz. He says, why has he consecrated the carob tree and the sycamore? He says, that's only going according to your shita. According to me, I say it wouldn't be consecrated the carob tree and the sycamore because he didn't consecrate the land around it, so he's not being nourished from hektish. But according to you, at least admit to me, okay, you've consecrated, since you say mocher ba'ayin ra, makdish ba'ayin ra, but you have consecrated the carob tree and the sycamore according to you, because therefore, since you say makdish ba'ayin yafa, you should at least have to consecrate the carob tree and the sycamore because it would be nourished from the land around it. But Amrli Rabbanon Loshna, and the rabbis say, no, we don't draw a distinction. We say that there's no difference between the well and the carob tree, that in both cases they're consecrated along with the field that was consecrated to the temple. So therefore, we could say that, and so that's how we justify this contradiction within Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is saying that this shita, he holds that you're makdish ba'ayin. When he says makdish ba'ayin ra, that was only according to this position of the Rabbanon, that they should say that with respect to the carob tree. And so therefore, when the Gemara says, we go back and say that what Rav Huna says earlier, that when you say if you sell a piece of land and you left back two trees for yourself, he held back, he also owns the land underneath them, that this would actually work even according to the position of Rabbi Akiva. Why? Because we now say that Rabbi Shimon himself is at the position that if you're makdish, you're ba'ayin ra makdish. So when you consecrate with a stingy eye, and you would leave back the land for yourself. And therefore the carob tree and the sycamore tree are not being nourished from the hektish. And so therefore, you don't have to say that Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva and Rav Huna says like the Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, okay, but ma'u kimtula, so if that's the case, that which you established at this law, at this brisa that says that if you consecrate two trees or three trees, one after the other, you have not consecrated the land. So you've established that this is like Rabbi Shimon, that if you consecrate 2 trees or 3 trees, one after the other, that you've not consecrated the land. That's hold like Rabbi Shimon, who says Makdish Bayin Ra. But that's a problem. Ema say for the concluding clause of the price says, but even if you consecrated the trees and then you consecrated the land, Kishu Poda Silanos Bishaveyan. It says in the next clause of the Brayza that if you consecrate the trees and then you go back and consecrated the real estate underneath them, and when he redeems the trees, he does the trees for their value, and then he has to go back and redeem the whole land for the 50 shekel kasef, like a steachuza. Because since the trees and the real estate were not consecrated at the same time, it's 2 separate hekdashos. Now, Rabbi Shimon, if it's Rabbi Shimon, why is it considered like 2 hekdashos? Bava Basra Pidyon. Why don't we look at what it's like at the moment of the redemption? Because at the moment of the redemption, the Shasa Pidyon, the karka, the real estate is consecrated with the trees, and everything is called a stay ilan, and so therefore it should be redeemed with the trees, and the trees should be redeemed with the land. They shouldn't have to redeem the trees separately. We know that Rabbi Shimon follows what it looks like at the moment of the redemption, and therefore should be considered a stay achuza. The Tanya, because we learned this in the Brayz. How do we know if a person, his father has an inherited field, and the son doesn't want to wait to inherit it? He's got other brothers, whatever, and he purchases it from his father, Viktisha, and then the son, after he purchases it, he consecrates it to the temple. And then the father dies. So at this point, the son would have inherited anyway. How do we know that the son, at this point, he could redeem it like a stay achuza for 50 shekel kasef, and now like a stay mikna, which is for its value, because it says tamomar v'imestay mikna so asher lo mistay achuza. So under this circumstances, that it says if there's a field that you acquire that is not from a stay achuza, so then you pay the full value. So if it's the field that's not capable of becoming a stay achuza, but this field, which is capable of becoming a stay achuza, is excluded. So Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon said in those circumstances, we look at it at the time of redemption, which is at the stay achuza, and so therefore he only redeems for 50 shekel kasef. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, how do we know if he purchased a field from his father and then the father dies, and then he redeems it, and then he consecrates him? Under those circumstances where he consecrated it after the father died, that then he can redeem it as a steachuza. This excludes the field which was a steachuza when you consecrated it. So according to Rabbi Meir, you can only redeem it for the 50 shekel discount, so to speak, if you redeemed it, if you consecrated it after his father had already died. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon allow you to redeem it for the 50 shekel, even if you consecrated it before the father died, and then the father died, and you would have gotten it as an inheritance. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, but according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, where the father died and then he consecrated it, they don't even need a verse, because it's obviously a steachuza. They only need a verse where it was consecrated and then the father died. So how do they know that when he consecrated it and then the father died, it's considered like a steachuza? He may high cry if they learn it from that verse. Then they should have just derived it like Rabbi Meir. So it must be Mishum the Azli Basar Pidyon. It must be that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon have the concept that we follow when the redemption takes place. And therefore we see that Rabbi Shimon should always say, go by the redemption. And therefore, if that's the case, if you consecrate 1 tree or 2 trees and then the land, you should be able to redeem the trees with the land for the 50 shekel kasef. So I'm Nachman Bar Yitzchak, no. Olam ba'alma, Rabbi Shimon lo azli basar pidyon. So we see, no, in general, they don't follow the status at the moment of the redemption. V'halcha kra ashkachu v'darash. Here, the reason why They don't need a verse to tell us. They don't need that verse like Rabbi Meir to tell us that if the father died and then you consecrate it, you redeem it for the 50 shekel. Because they darshan the verse. It says, "Im kein lichtov kravim estei miknaso asher lo achuzaso," or inami stay achuzaso. The pasuk could have said, if it's field of acquisition that was not an achuza, or stay achuzaso. My asher lo mi stay achuzaso. That is not from a field of achuza. Esh eina ru'uyo yo stay achuza. That comes to exclude the one that is not ever able to become a stay achuza. Yotza zo sheru'uyo yo stay achuza. This excludes this field, which is capable of becoming a steachuza at the moment of redemption, and therefore they're going to say that this field is obviously redeemed for 50 shekel kesef. So now, since we learned in the Brisa earlier that if you consecrate 3 trees at once, you've consecrated the land with them that they need. The Gemara is going to bring a teaching from Rav Huna that relates to this. Actually, 2 teachings from Rav Huna. So Rav Huna says, Amar Rav Huna, Charav Hamorka v'Sadan HaShikma. Let's say you have a carob tree or the sycamore tree. So they're going to have Torah's Elon Olav, the Torah's Karaka Olav. It's going to have the law, a carob tree and a sycamore tree. They actually have the law of a tree and they have the law of real estate. Torah's Elon Olav, that it's going to have the law of a tree. The Heicha de Iktish Ozav, and that if this sycamore was consecrated or sold, Shnei Yuanos Vahai, meaning to say that there are 2 other trees that were consecrated with it or sold with it, then it can combine with them to make a third tree. So then Yeshlo Karaka. So then the person who purchased it has the land underneath it as though it was 3 trees. So therefore it has the Torah's Elon, as the law of the tree. And as the Torah's Karka of the woman's Dabin Agav Ara. And as the law of a tree, that it's not considered to be sold with the field because it's its own independent item, so it's the law of a field. So it's the law of a tree that you combine with other trees to make it the laws of trees, which are sold together as a unit of 3 with the land. And you have the law of the real estate, that it's its own independent item and it's not sold with a field. So it's a significant tree. Amar Rav Huna, the second one, Rav Huna says, Omer, let's say you have this bundle of grain, sheyesh bo satayim, that is, it's a volume of 2 seah. So it's Torah's Omer Olav, Torah's Gadish Olav. It's going to be considered like a bundle and considered like a pile. How do we say, why do we care that it's considered like a bundle? Torah's Omer Olav, because what's the law of an Omer? Dishnei Omarim, let's say you have 2 bundles that you forgot in the field, the laws of Shikha apply. That means to say the laws of the halacha of forgetting. You're not allowed to come back to them and collect them because they're considered to be is insignificant enough. But let's say Shnaivahu, you have 2 bundles and this this omer that's the size of 2 seah, then Einon Shecha, then it's like you forgot 3 bundles together, and so therefore the laws of Shecha don't apply. This is verse V'shechas Omer b'sadeh, means say if you forget a bundle below a gadish and not a pile, and so therefore three omarim together are considered to be a gadish, a pile, and they're no longer going to be considered to be an omer. And so that's the first halacha. So we see from here that even though it's large, even though it's a base satayim, nevertheless we're going to say that it's considered to be a gadish at that point. So that's the first thing. So then, but what's the next? Well, how is it considered to be a Torah's gadish alav? That is considered to be a pile. The Tanan Omer sheich bo satayim. If this Omer has satayim, Shecho ain't shecha. That at that point, it's going to be, if you forgot it, if it's the size of a satayim, then it's shecha. It's not considered to be shecha, and then you don't have to go back and get it, because then it's considered to be a big pile. So we have these contradictory laws that on the one hand, if you have 2 bundles and then you combine it with this Omer that's the size of a satayim, then it's going to be considered three bundles because you have three Omarim together and you don't go back and get it. On the other end, it's considered like a Kaddish, like a pile, because in and of itself, you're going to, if it's two satayim, then you don't, the laws of Shechah don't apply. So now the Gemara just does a coda to our chapter. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana Reish Lakish. The Rabbi Bar Chana says in the name of Reish Lakish, Charav Hamorka V'Sadin Shikma, a carob tree and a sycamore, Banu Machokas Rabbi Menachem Bar Rabbi Yossi Rabbanan. The Menachem Bar Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan have a dispute. Remember, the Rabbanan said in our Mishnah that a carob tree and a sycamore, and also a well and a cistern, when you're makdish the field along with everything, including the carob tree and the sycamore. But Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah said you were makdish along with the field, the carob tree and the sycamore, but not the well and the cistern. And so the Gemara here is attributing this position to Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, why not say Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan? Why isn't Reish Lakish saying that there's a dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan? So the Gemara says, no, that's what he's teaching us. Kamash one to Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Sfirah. He's teaching us that Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Yossi holds like Rabbi Shimon. We've completed you, Hamochar Asabayas.